I found out my sugar daddy was stalking me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I signed up to a sugar daddy website last year. I lost my job because of COVID. Just started my own small business and things were not going well. I also helped my parents out with money because I didn't want them to be working during COVID. I signed up to a website and instantly I started getting messages. One man stood out because he was very active and owned several businesses. I told him I didn't want to meet up because I just wasn't going to do that, but also because of COVID. He agreed to have a phone conversation with me and then eventually he offered me $5,000 a month. This was more than enough to help me and my parents out. After that, I was basically his online companion. He would text me and I would text back. We went out to dinner a few times, but because of COVID, we kept our distance. It was truly the perfect scenario for me. Then I noticed that he started to get really clingy. If I didn't text him back right away, he would get upset. One day I got another message from the sugar daddy website. Another man was asking me to go out to dinner twice a week, and he wanted to pay me $1,000 for this. So I said, of course. When I told sugar daddy number one that I'd be busy 2 days out of the week, he got really mad and asked me where I lived. I told him I couldn't tell him. That's when my sugar daddy asked me where I lived. I was not about to tell him where I lived. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I told him I couldn't tell him. And he got really upset and offered me $2,000 more, which means that he would be paying me $7,000 a month. Then he said that he didn't want me to be with any other sugar daddies. At this point, I hadn't even told him that I was approached by another sugar daddy. So how did he know that I was talking to another one? I accepted his offer of $7,000 a month, but this only made him even worse. He would call me all the time and ask me where I was, and he would constantly ask me where I lived. He noticed a change in me, and that's when he offered to buy me a car. A Mercedes, to be exact. I didn't know if I should accept or not because I knew it would make him feel like he had more ownership over me. I told him that I wasn't sure if I should accept the car because of his behavior. Then he said that he would buy me my own apartment. I felt really creeped out, so I decided not to answer his phones or his messages the rest of the night. 2 hours later, I'm laying in bed and I hear a really hard knock at my door. It was him. My sugar daddy starts banging on my front door. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. And he didn't know where I lived. I look through the peephole and I tell him to leave. That's when he shows me a wad of cash. He tells me I can keep it with no strings attached. I said no, and that's when he started calling me names. He started yelling really loud. I was hoping my neighbors would hear and call the cops. In order to calm him down, I opened the door and I let him in. Big mistake. He asked to use my bathroom, and that's when I grabbed his phone. I saw on his camera roll that he had pictures and video of me. He'd been following me around for months. I started calling the cops, but that's when he came out of the bathroom. Asked if he could stay over and I said yes. I was so scared. We're supposed to have dinner tonight. The cops said they can't help because he hasn't heard. Part 4. I checked my sugar daddy's cell phone. There were so many pictures and videos of me, which means he had been following me around for months. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I told him I was sick and he had to sleep on the couch. The following day, he left my apartment really early, so I called the police and I told them everything. They told me they can't do anything because he hasn't physically hurt me yet. My sugar daddy asked me out for dinner and I had to say yes, just to act like everything was normal. At dinner, he acted completely normal, like he hadn't showed up to my apartment the night before and yelled at me. That's when he offered me more money and the new apartment again. I told him I just couldn't accept it. Then I confronted him about the pictures and video on his cell phone. Of course, he denied everything. I asked to see his phone and he handed it to me. And of course, he had deleted all the evidence. So now it's just my word against his. Then he handed me keys to my new car. It's a beautiful car. I don't even know if I should accept it or not. Should I get a restraining order? I don't know what to do.
If you can solve this riddle, you're a genius. There was this woman and she was a serial killer. She would take men on dates and then poison them and kill them. One day she goes on a date with you. Ooh, but she can't go through with it because she's so in love with you. Eventually, you two end up getting married and you buy a house together. When you buy the house, she claims the basement for her work and she says that you're not allowed to go down there. You say okay and you're happily married. But as time goes on, you get really curious and one day she leaves for work and you decide to go downstairs and see what's down there. When you go downstairs, it's pitch black and you reach around the walls to see if there's a light switch to turn on, but there isn't. As you're feeling around the room, there's a light bulb above you that is unscrewed a little bit. You screw it in a little bit more to turn on the light. Immediately, you see all the dead bodies that she's ever killed, and you're in shock as you're looking around for a while, but then you hear her car pull up in the driveway and she's home from work. You quickly unscrew the light bulb, run upstairs, and sit down. When she gets home, she goes downstairs to check on her dead bodies, and she immediately knew that you were in there. How did she know?
Cheer Scandal Part 1. So my understanding is that in the South, Texas in particular, where this week's case takes place, cheerleading is a big deal. A big deal. And this is kind of a foreign concept to me because I'm from the Midwest, and before I went to high school, there were like 4 cheerleaders on the high school team, and they were not a part of the popular crowd that you see like in movies. And by the time I got to high school, there was no cheer squad at all for the entire 4 years that I went there. I don't know if this was just my high school, but I don't remember seeing cheerleaders from other high schools come to football games either. But anyway, moving on. This week's case really intrigued me for the fact that I'm completely oblivious to how serious cheerleading is. But for those of you who have had experience with how serious cheerleading can be in certain areas, how far do you think a mother would go to get their daughter a spot on the high school cheer squad? This week's case is short, should be about only 5 parts. All of them will be uploaded shortly. Cheer Scandal Part 2. The year is 1990. A young girl, around 13 years old at the time, named Shayna Harper, had taken cheerleading at a gymnastics studio. Her mother, Wanda, had also provided private cheerleading lessons for Shayna because she wanted her to be successful at it. Another girl named Amber Heath also attended the same gymnastics studio as Shayna. And they were both friends, by the way. So these two young ladies were wanting to try out for the 7th grade cheer squad, and I guess in order to do so, they had to campaign for the spots. This is more serious than I ever thought. Amber had an idea for her campaign, which was to pass out flyers with little peppermint candies on them to her classmates. Well, I guess Wanda, remember Shayna's mom, did not like this idea at all and wound up complaining to the school board and everyone else to try and have Amber disqualified. I mean, how are you going to come for a 13-year-old child like that? Who as an adult should know better? Come on. But Amber's plan worked and she was chosen for the cheer squad, and Shayna was not. Cheer Scandal Part 3. So the next year, Wanda decides that she needs to get Shayna on her game before tryouts. So she starts to plan months ahead. She has Vote for Shayna printed on pencils and rulers for Shayna to pass out at school. But I guess these items were not allowed because they were somehow against the rules. But Amber got to pass out those peppermint candies the year before. So Wanda's like, just pass them out anyway. But other parents got wind of this and voted against Shayna being able to campaign. Like, this is so ridiculous to me. But anyway, so Wanda gets the idea to meet up with her ex-husband's brother, Terry. Now, Terry had been in trouble with the law a few times. And when Wanda complained to Terry about Amber and Amber's mother, Verna, Terry made a joke that she should just have someone basically off them, you know? And Wanda's like, no, that's a great idea. Do you know someone who will? And Terry's completely convinced that Wanda is serious. So what does he do? He actually does the right thing. He goes to the sheriff's department. Cheer Scandal Part 4. So at first, cops don't believe Terry because it sounded so ridiculous that someone would want to off someone, including a child, over cheerleading. But Terry assured detectives that he was telling the truth. So they get Terry all wired up for a conversation with Wanda to see if this lady is actually serious. So during that conversation, Terry tells Wanda that finding someone who is willing to off a teenager would be difficult. Wanda's response to this was basically that she could punch Amber in the face and that she's a bitch. A little 13-year-old girl. Nice, Wanda. And let's not forget that Amber was just really trying to, cheer. And that Wanda had been friends with Verna, Amber's mother, for years. And Shayna and Amber, their daughters, were friends and had sleepovers together. Eventually, Wanda and Terry agree on a price of $2,500 to off Amber's mom, Verna. She decides to leave Amber alone, but hopes that she's too upset over her mother's death to try out. Cheer Scandal Part 5. So this kind of reminds me of the Lululemon case. Someone was murdered over a frickin' pair of overpriced yoga pants. And in this case, a woman wants to kill someone over a 13-year-old's cheerleading tryouts. And let's just say that Wanda truly believed that Shayna could make a career out of cheering, which there are people who definitely do. But you still can't cheer forever, right? Even if you're like a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. Like I said, I don't know much about this, but just wow. So Wanda tells Terry that she could never off someone herself, but she can definitely hire someone else to do it, no problem. Of course, Wanda's arrested. She is found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison, but Wanda appeals and is granted a new trial and winds up serving 6 months with 10 years probation, I believe. When Wanda was a teenager, her father wouldn't let her try out for cheer, so I guess she decided to live vicariously through Shayna. And the sad thing is that Shayna was bullied because of all of this. But at least nobody was hurt or killed. That's all I have for this case. Thanks for sticking with me.